welcome back to the podcast. Today we have on a very, very special guest, former Afghan veteran Andrew Bragg. He was with the Army Infantry with the 1st, the 503rd, and then a second deployment to the 508th. His new book that's coming out called The Devil's Playground, the story of two Charlie and the Arghandab River Valley. That book is out on October 15th, and we're going to jump right into it because Afghanistan is one of my favorite subjects of all time. So, all right, Andrew, thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So what, kind of give a little bit of context. About 2 or 3 podcasts ago, we had on William Yeski, and we were just talking about it before we hopped on. And I had heard about the Arghandab River Valley years ago. I wish I could remember his name. He was a sniper with me when I was a contractor. And I remember hearing about his stories. I believe he was Arghandab, but I remember hearing that name. And I believe, I got to double check with my buddy, I believe he also served in the Arghandab River Valley, but about a year or two after you guys. But, so it's an infamous valley. It's kind of like Korengal. It's legendary. It's always named throughout time. What was your guys' experience heading into that? Typically we kind of go over history, but I mean Arghandab, it's kind of do you guys know what you were getting into before you even, were all right, this is the shit. Did you guys get, after action reports from the unit prior? What was your guys' headspace going into that deployment?
Yeah. So we replaced some striker guys, second ID guys on the north side of the river. And, from word of mouth, and ARs and stuff from them, we thought we were going into the shit, gonna get hit every day, IEDs everywhere. And we initially moved into the valley in December. So it's kind of like the winter time. And, there's a fighting season in Afghanistan. And if you're not in the fighting season, it's kind of pretty stagnant. So when we first got there, it was kind of hyped up and we didn't really see a lot, we just patrolled our areas, got to learn our AO, and didn't receive much resistance. We found some historic IEDs and stuff that had been placed in the ground for a long time and stuff like that. But for the most part, initially, it wasn't that bad. But as, the leaves returned to the valley and as, it got greener and greener and, vegetation grew and your visibility was cut from a couple 100-yard or 100 meters to 50 meters or less. That's when the fighters returned to the valley. And that's when all the kind of the hype and, the AARs from the unit that we replaced kind of came to light. And oh yeah, they weren't joking. This place is pretty legit. And we started getting into heavy contact, receiving casualties. We'd be fighting daily. Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, like I said, what kind of makes that spot different from everywhere else? Korengal Valley, I understand the northeast, that's where I was at.
Yeah.
And the mountains are just everywhere. And then my buddies that were in Korengal, our sister team, clearly that's just drastic terrain. And then where we're at was pretty drastic as well, but it was rolling hills and mountains. You guys in the south are a little bit different. So what's that terrain like down there? Like I said, I don't have a ton of experience down in the south.
Yeah, so the Arghandab River kind of flowed on the northwest side of the Kandahar city. There was a small mountain range that separated the valley from the actual city. So you could drive maybe an hour or two, in vehicles and be out of the valley and be in Kandahar city. But on the other side of those mountains was the Arghandab. And I mean, we described it as Vietnam, because once the pomegranate orchards and the grape fields started to grow and get their leaves and stuff, it was just so thick, the vegetation was, a jungle and super humid, it'd be 120 degrees out in the desert, but in the shade of the orchards and stuff, it just traps all that moisture. And, they have all their canals from the river to irrigate their fields. I believe the Arghandab is number one for pomegranate exports, I don't know. That's a fact. You'd have to check that.
I was literally thinking about that. I'm like, of all the the combat going on, I was like, man, I wonder if they like stopped and ate some grapes and like pomegranates, like on patrol.
We totally did.
Yeah.
But so like historically though, like that valley, the Brits fought there, the Russians. I've heard word. I haven't looked up any like historical facts on this, but like Alexander the Great fought there. But I know like the Russians kind of definitely fought in the Arghandab. There's some literature out there that talks about them in like 1982 having a huge offensive in the Arghandab, to which the Russians were defeated, and then they came back in 1987. And there's a lot of just books out there about the fighters in the area. And if you look at like the tactics they were using back then to fight the Russians, it's the same thing they were doing to us, in 2009, 2010. They were using the same villages, the same terrain, like Babur was mentioned in that literature. And that was one of their strongholds for us as well. They drew a line in the sand and we couldn't pass it to even get to Babur. And Tarak Kalacha, that was just a historical village that they fought out of against the Russians, and they littered the land with landmines, and they would wait for the Russian soldiers, the dismounted soldiers, to get within 10 meters before they opened fire to make sure that they would one, hit their target, and then two, they wouldn't be able to retreat. So, a lot of the same stuff is what we were experiencing, and like just the thickness of the valley and all the mud walls and stuff like that, like it prohibited like vehicle use. So we couldn't really bring down a lot of vehicles into the valley because there's just no way of getting them down there. It's like a maze, like a labyrinth of mud walls. So like if you think of like neighborhoods in America, we all have fences. It's kind of similar over there, right? They have mud walls. They have mud walls around their fields, and like their grape fields were just rows and rows of like 3 foot tall mud walls so that the grapevines could grow up the mud walls. And so you'd be hopping over mud wall after mud wall, and then dodging bombs, and then all of a sudden guys would be popping over those mud walls shooting at you. So got pretty intense. So. Yeah,
that's wild. I always tell people that haven't been there, kind of the beauty of Afghanistan. It's like that deadly beauty. It's been there through history. And every once in a while, some country goes in, and and they always talk about that too with like the Russians, because we read The Bear Went Over the Mountain, before we went in 2008.
Yeah,
talked about the Russians and stuff like that, and and we were in the RC Central, RC East, and so it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I ended up spending a lot more time there after I got out as a contractor. But yeah, you talk about those walls and like the grapes and the pomegranates, and like and like some people are kind of like, well, why don't you just drop a bomb on it? It's like, well, we did. And the thing is, they just hold up. Like some of these, the kalats, which I believe translates into fortress, doesn't it? I think it like the word kalat or something like that. And you would like these families all live in these homes, and these things have been around for like maybe a few hundred years, depending on what area you're in.
Yeah.
And they're just thick. They're 3-4 feet wide, just the home, and so, when you start, shooting machine guns, it doesn't do anything, Yeah.
That's so, what my brother, like I let him like read the book, and like he was asking me like, you guys are shooting at him, like doesn't like the walls crumble and eventually penetrate? I'm like, no, man, absolutely not. Like that.
Yeah.
It's been there since like biblical times. It ain't going anywhere.
Before we get going with the podcast, I want to drop this week's discount code for 9line Apparel. We're not just a brand, we're a lifestyle that celebrates the spirit of freedom, courage, and American values. Go check out our gear, including hoodies, glassware, flags, jackets, hats, patches, and much more. All material is ethically sourced, so every shirt you buy is free of slave labor. As a veteran-owned and operated company, we take pride in giving back to those who've served. Your purchases help us contribute to charitable initiatives supporting veterans and first responders. This episode's discount code is DPG20 for 20% off 9line Apparel products. I say again, DPG20, not 10, not 15, but 20%. Not 25, because that's a bit excessive. So get over to the store and get yourself 20% off your next purchase. While you're at it, like, listen, and subscribe to the 9 Line of Podcasts for future discount codes and more conversations with amazing guests like today. Now back to the podcast. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's funny too, because you think about it, like, because the Russians were there, you know, and they're used to blowing shit up as their tactic. And I was just in Ukraine, and like, you think, you know, the concrete buildings are in Ukraine, but they're like wiping out complete neighborhoods and towns. And I think back to Afghanistan, like, well, their walls aren't 4 feet thick, you know, like mud and dirt and earth, you know. It's like there's just a different you know, type of structure. It's insane, you know. And like you said, they've been using that forever. They know the tactics. They know what to do. Old timers are teaching the new guys, you know. So what was your guys' essential mission then in the Arghandab? I mean, you know, I think as we get on and, you know, more on, it's, you know, cause you're 9 and 10. So, you know, we're 15 years on now. You know, what was the kind of like the mission statement for you guys? You know, what was the primary mission? I mean, just go find the Taliban, kill them, or hey, we're doing coin operations. What was your guys' main mission?
As a little bit of both. So I believe, like, kind of like as a whole, the battalion's operation in the Arghandab was to cut off any kind of like rat trails into Kandahar. So there's a big supply route through the Arghandab into Kandahar. So our presence in that valley was kind of to limit the freedom of movement of the enemy, to supply, you know, the Taliban within the city. But like, we did work with a lot of the Afghan National Police officers in establishing kind of like, you know, like training them on what they're supposed to be doing, patrolling their, you know, their sectors, you know, things like that. Like, but yeah, so, but I mean, eventually, so, I mean, we did a lot of hunter-killer patrolling in the area and stuff like that, looking for bad guys. And like initially it just, you know, no one was there. Like I say, and like throughout the wintertime, it was pretty quiet, which was kind of like a blessing in disguise if you think about it, you know, hindsight, because we got to learn the area, we got to learn all the fields, we got to learn what, you know, was right and what shouldn't have been there before the fighters moved in. And then, you know, there's just kind of like April, May timeframe, it's just like a light switch turned on and the fighters moved in. And then our mission kind of changed. I mean, we were still there to, you know, saturate the area and prevent enemy movement. But I mean, it just became like a day-to-day, like, okay, like, let's go roll. Let's go fight these guys, you know, with the best we can. And yeah, we continue to just take casualties as, you know, from second platoon. You know, we had like 6 wounded one day, and, you know, like another, you know, we just kept taking casualties. And I think like we got down to like almost like 2 squads worth of guys. So yeah, operating out of Cop Tines, like we had to provide, you know, our own QRF. We had to provide our own patrolling and our own, like, you know, cop security. Just as a platoon sized element. So after taking all these casualties and stuff, like, you know, it's not like, oh, okay, like, well, let's just wait for reinforcements. Like, no, we still had to patrol the areas. We still had to, you know, go south of the Second Canal and bring the fight, you know, to the enemy. Otherwise they'd be at our doorstep. So, I mean, it just became like a day in, day out. Like, just you were either on patrol getting ready to get hit, or you were on QRF getting ready to go help your buddy, you know, who's going to get hit.
So you guys really only had a platoon size element then?
Yeah,
at your
so
fob.
Charlie Company was kind of split up between 3 combat outposts. So you had Cop Tines, which was 2 Charlie. That was second platoon. That was my platoon. You had 1 and 3 Charlie down at Cop Nolan. And then our headquarters element was kind of at Terra Nova, which was, they had like a squad, or I believe it was like a squad from 1 or 3 Charlie that, you know, went to Terra Nova as well as like a security element and stuff like that. But so we were kind of split up, and like 2 Charlie, like our AO was like huge. Like it was like it was probably like 8 kilometers, like in total, like 8 square kilometers in total, which isn't big, but like when you're talking like walking through thick orchards and, you know, like climbing walls every 3 feet, like that's a lot of ground to cover as a platoon. So like there'd be like we'd do movements like dismounted patrols to the Shuins, which was pretty far east village. It was probably about 4 kilometers away, and just going to those villages, man, like you just felt like you were on the moon, because your QRF is, not anywhere. It's going to take them a minute to get there, so you get hit out there and you better be ready for, to hold your own for a minute.
Yeah. And that seems too, I think a lot of people don't get that was a lot different from Iraq to Afghanistan. Was Afghanistan, you're on your own. We were the same way. We had, as a combat advisor, we were, whatever was in our truck, that was it, man. No one coming for us, and our QRF, which was our guys in our team too, were the same way. Like, all right, man, it's going to take a while to get up this valley road. There's one valley road and maybe air support can come your way, can be pushed, but air support's spread out through the whole country. So unless you are really, really in it, they weren't coming. So I remember that, like having the, we had 3 to 4 levels of radio communication. Then it came down to like cell phones. If it got so bad, you got to whip out a cell phone like Roshan and like dial the talk, but at that point, but I agree with you. I mean, that's, it's wild. I mean, so did you guys get resupplied then with like through helicopters, or was it through, you guys, like I said, you guys weren't mobile very much. So, I mean, what was that logistics like? I mean, because I always like to paint a picture for people that are listening, like, what is that picture like? I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere, you're on a COP, or combat outpost. How do you even get resupplied with your logistics?
Yeah, so we did have like a FLC clip that would come through kind of rarely. Our outpost was like the furthest northeast in the battalion. As things got more established, we were able to get resupplied. But for the most part, we did establish like HLZs at COP times where they could, drop, pallets of stuff out to us. But we would go on what we would call thunder runs. So we did have vehicles, we just couldn't use them, to help us in our patrolling. But we could go, I think about like once a month, we would drive to Kandahar Airfield to do like resupplies. So we'd pick up food pallets, we'd pick up, water, ammunition, stuff like that. So we would do we call them thunder runs. But that's how mainly we got resupplied, is we had to go get our own stuff. And it's funny, I talked about this in the book. Kandahar Airfield, it might as well be like Disney World, they got a boardwalk, they have like restaurants, they have TGI Fridays. So it was, if you got to go on a thunder run, it was kind of like a R&R for a day, you go, take a warm shower, change out of your dirty ACUs and, run amok amongst the non-combat, personnel in the military.
Yeah. No, I remember that too, because I was there in 08, 09 for my deployment, and then I went back in 2010 as a contractor right away. Yeah. And I was there in, I think it was end of February at Kandahar. We flew into Kandahar, and then I went to up to Bagram. So I was in Kandahar the CAF for like maybe 2 days, 3 days. Guy was like, send me up north. I was,
Yeah.
And, they had just opened up that TGI Fridays on the boardwalk. And so it was weird. So I don't even know if we ate there. I got a photo of me standing right next to it, like the day it opened or something like that. And, it was so weird, cause I'm like, it's a TGI Fridays, like with the, it was I'm sure you remember, it was like a sit down. So it was like a replica of a TGI Friday. It was so weird.
Well, it's just awkward. Like you see these people in uniform sitting down, eating, having fun, joking and stuff. And you just came from like, literally, like fighting every day, it's just like you're on a different planet, it's like,
oh yeah. Yep.
And then you go to sit down and like you go to the chow hall there or something and your uniform's too dirty. So they wouldn't, let you eat or something. It's just like, it's ridiculous. Yep. And like, So we'd use the opportunity while we were at Kandahar to like, I guess, tactically acquire things.
Yeah.
Like anything that wasn't tied down or, had someone watching it, must not have been important enough. So, we'd steal Gatorades and stuff behind chow halls and whatnot. Just,
Yeah. Get the Rippets. You guys steal the cases of Rippets? Yeah, we did too. Yeah. It got to the point where the chow was like, let's fucking give them to you. Because our base, we were at Black Horse, Cop Black Horse, or Fob Black Horse. So it was a Camp Black Horse, I guess you'd call it. There's different names, but it was really small. It was on the outskirts of Kabul. It was like the last base. It's where the ANA trained. And that was like kind of the last stop. If you turned out, you'd go straight into the mountains towards Jabad, like right. So you go into the Kabul area, and it was like boom, right through the mountain pass within like a 2 to 5 minute drive, And and it was so small, and we would just go raid the Rippets, and then finally the chow hall people were like, okay, just fucking we'll order it for you, because it was such a small base. It wasn't like Bagram where we go to Bagram every once in a while, but it was just where you could. It's such a big thing. They're just like people are snatching shit or whatever. Like they knew it was us because we're the only assholes like on combat mission on the base. It was all NATO, National Guard, or like Air Force or whatever, or the headquarters element. So, but I know what you mean. Yeah, you got to snatch up those Gatorades and those Rippets.
We went as far as like we snuck into an MWR gym and just took whatever we wanted. It was pretty funny. Just like one at a time, you just sneak out with like weights or whatever. And the desk was like, "What are you guys doing?" It's like, "Oh, like Battalion Sergeant Major said this stuff's broken, so we need to turn it back in." Whatever.
Yeah. The guy signing you in's making like $100K a year. He doesn't give a fuck. Like he's like, whatever. No, that's awesome. And like I said, that's it is weird. Like I said, remember, and like I said, we're all in this AO at the same time, especially in Kandahar. It's that was weird. And then seeing the boardwalk and the, like I said, I wasn't primarily there, but remember that and seeing the coffee shops and, all the pogues, they're all getting their coffee. And we dealt with the same shit too, man. I'm with you. Like, when we went back to, Bagram, that was the same way, Dairy Queen and Pizza Hut. And that was even more built out, and they had Disney, I think it was Disney Road. And that was a pain in the ass. They're trying to give, like, the Air Force was trying to give like speeding tickets or some stupid shit like that to.
Really?
Oh yeah. There's a point where you get speeding tickets, and then you'd also get a ticket, I think, if you weren't wearing a glow belt. That was a running joke.
Oh my god!
At one point, it was. I don't know if it was. I was for sure at night, I think, and then it was like, they started doing that stupid shit too, where it was like, all right, if you have a magazine in your rifle, or and like I said, we would roll in. We tried to do the quick hit, roll up, don't fuck with us, and grab our shit or whatever we needed from like the PX, go protein powder or whatever, and then we'd just get the hell out. It wasn't worth fighting whatever Sergeant Major wanted.
Similar with us is the longer you spent at CAF, the more chance you had of getting in trouble. So,
exactly. And I think that's what's kind of annoying is that's like anywhere, and like, not to bring it up too much, but like I was just in Ukraine, and Kyiv is the same way. I mean, these guys are, I was with the guys near the front line in Izium on the east, and it's just the same shit, different war, same shit. They're like, the Kyiv is gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's like a war is not even going on. And in literally the biggest conventional war since like World War II is like going on the front line, like it's horrific. Everything, trench fighting, tanks, everything, conventional war through and through. Guys are getting killed left and right. And like, though they're feeling it. Like the guys are like, it's a big cultural rift right now. It's not even like us fighting. If it's like the country is in like a kind of in a rift. Cause they're like, you motherfuckers don't think there's a war going on right now. Like half the squad just got killed, so it's not just our wars. It's almost like any war. I think any country is like that. Like it's it's not that bad over here. I'm getting TGI Fridays and all this other bullshit, Dairy Queen, and whether the rest of like the minimal amount of guys are fighting the actual war. I think it's always a frustration gets shared, I think, through almost every country that goes to war. But no, that's awesome. So these thunder runs then, did you guys worry about then actually getting hit on these runs, but out of your fob and out of your, making these runs?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the IED threat, and we did hit some IEDs on these runs and whatnot. But like honestly, I mean, I wouldn't say when you're in a vehicle you felt safer, but from the experience we had of stepping on these bombs and getting blown up outside of these vehicles, it's like you felt a little bit more protected while in a vehicle. You didn't feel invincible, but I mean, I'd rather hit a bomb in a truck than stepping on it, And we were experiencing the daily threat of stepping on IEDs, Not only, yeah, so there's always the constant threat, but I mean, for the most part, Route Red Dog was the main route out of the Arghandab, and that was pretty heavily, watched and patrolled. And I think even at one point it became a paved road. I could be wrong or misremembering that, but yeah, I mean, once you hit the paved roads of Kandahar, you were pretty all right. I mean, you don't let your guard down at all, but the pucker factor definitely goes down.
Yeah. Yeah, we were like that too, man. Northeast, that people, it's such a crazy, because I said in Afghanistan, there was almost like you had a different war than Iraq, but then every valley had its own war, its own tactics, had its, like, we never worried about IEDs. 2008, 2009, not one IED in 10 months. Dude, we were rolling solo too, by the way. We were in a Humvee, armored out, or we were just in a Toyota Hilux, or we were just in a Ford Ranger. It just rocking and rolling through the valley, 1-2 gun trucks, if that. We were rocking between Kabul and then into the Jabad Pass and then up these mountains. So, but it was like, there wasn't a huge presence of U.S. personnel. So I guess maybe they just didn't, the chance of, we went out randomly too. So it's not like you could just monitor for days on end. No one would patrol it for 10, 20 days and then boom, here we are, come flying by. So it probably was never worth it. But yeah, it was nuts. They're like, you never worried about it? I was like, no, it was actually kind of nice because when we're coming from Iraq, where every corner you turn, there might be an IED, but again, like I said though, but then guys that went down to Kandahar or in other areas, it was like, that road is going to be, IED heaven, it's going to be, you're going to get your shit blown up constantly. So it was nice not having that. But like I said, for you guys though, I imagine the foot patrol aspect, we did encounter that in Iraq. And so some people were like, wow, you guys, it was a few times, but imagine what you guys were going through on a daily basis. What kind of stuff were they using? Like, what was the tactics? It's always interesting to dive into the technicals and tactics. Like, what were they doing? What were they using? So,
I mean, a lot of the fighters in the valley, so they'd set up their ambushes on their IEDs. So they basically already had an L-shaped ambush set up on you. And they kind of wait for you to either hit the IED, or if you guys, by the luck of, God, if you missed it, they'd pop up and shoot you to try to get you to scramble to, then hit the IED. So initially, our initial contact that we saw in the valley was just kind of like probing us to see what we would do. They take a couple pop shots, and then, see how we would react. And that's when they started planning, they played their cat and mouse game of like, okay, where are we going to put these bombs? What are we going to, what type of initiation devices are we going to use and stuff? And in the beginning, a lot of the locals were the ones that were blowing up the IEDs. We had locals come to us and like wheelbarrows, his legs blown off and stuff because he was going to farm his field and he, walked through his doorway to his field and that's where the bomb was. So we've had kids get playing with IEDs and stuff, and them going off on them. But a lot of that was just locals at first. Then they got better at, setting in like the main charges. So a lot of the IEDs we encountered, they had like an initiation device, be it like an anti-personnel mine, from the Russians, like the toe poppers, like the pressure plates. We had tripwires. They set up tripwires out there. They had anti-pressure plates. They did start using RCs towards the end. So like remote control, like the stealth phone IEDs and stuff like that. But, mainly it was like the toe poppers, and what they would do is they'd wrap those toe poppers in det cord, and then the det cord would be, connected to jugs of homemade explosives. So like the yellow jugs of HME and stuff like that. So the main charge, the HME, they could bury and leave there. And then their initiation devices, like their toe poppers, their tripwires, whatever else, they could remove those so that they can mitigate the chances of, locals hitting them, or kids, blowing themselves up and stuff like that. So a lot of times, as soon as we stepped foot from Cop Tines, they'd have eyes on us. We could listen on the ICOM radios, they'd be like, yep, they're heading east, or yep, they're heading south, and the fighters in the areas would then, if we were heading south, the guys south would start, putting in their initiation devices on those IEDs and setting up their ambushes, waiting for us. And then, like, what we noticed in the beginning was, like, every mud wall, well, I wouldn't say every, but a lot of the mud walls had just, like, little holes in them, like, about, like, that big. And at first we were like, what the heck are these? We thought they were just kind of like irrigation holes, so that they wouldn't have to run any like hoses up and over the walls. They could just run them through the walls or whatever to help like irrigate their field. But we soon learned out that they turned out to be like what we called murder holes. Yeah. So just little peepholes that they could stick their PKM, machine gun barrels through and, light us up. And, trying to hit a hole like that while you're receiving fire, that's, pretty hard. So you have about, a squad size element of guys shooting at you through a wall. And then, either before or after an IED goes off, you're treating casualties under fire and stuff like that. So they got pretty crafty and they learned real quick. And, like I said, it's like a game of cat and mouse. They learned how we operated and then they adjusted. And then we learned how they operated and adjusted. And just like maneuvering on the enemy in the valley, like, man, you're risking, because they would put IEDs on their flanks because they watched us, they knew, oh, we're going to flank them. Okay. So that's where they put their second IEDs, so they initiate ambushes and they bait us into stuff. Sometimes they just take pop shots just to get us to maneuver on them, see how we maneuver, but also then, okay, so if they're going to go this way, like, let's, set up a bomb over there. So then we'll take a couple shots at them from there. And when they maneuver on us, we walk into an IED. So like, I mean, just constant cat and mouse game. And like the fighting kind of just evolved throughout the whole deployment. Battle Drill 1 Alpha kind of went out the window, squad attack, squad flank, like even how we moved through the valley kind of evolved, like we plotted every single patrol we went on and tried not to take the same path twice. We tried to stay off the paths. We climbed over the walls. We climbed under the walls. We broke through the walls, even just tried to be as unpredictable as possible. If it looked like an easy path, you don't take it. Yeah. That was a trap. Because they had bombs on the pass, they had them on the fields, they had them in the trees, they had them in the walls. They're just everywhere. Like, it's hard to and they could be anything. We ran into like a coffee can IED. It was literally like a Folgers coffee can, and they had rigged it to be kind of like a homemade like bouncing Betty. There's an initial charge that blew it up into the air, and then the secondary charge, which thankfully was a dud, it didn't go off. That was the charge that was supposed to blow all the nuts and bolts in the coffee can, into the air, sending shrapnel everywhere. They were pretty good at what they did in the valley.
So, and that's the thing too, is, I mean, how did your guys' tactics evolve? Like I said, they kept evolving theirs. Clearly you guys started like evolving your tactics. What was it? Did you guys do anything like, I don't want to say that's basically thinking outside the box, like I said, you have the drills. These don't work, and we figured that out right away too. Like in the Northeast, man, like, we were in the mountains, good fucking luck. Did you guys, what kind of stuff did you guys evolve into? Like I said, you kind of started even just your routes. Obviously that's one thing, but what was the stuff when you guys did make contact? Like, okay, we know they're going to set a bomb to our flank. What do we do? We know they're about to hit us. What do we do? What did you guys end up kind of evolving into, to help counter that?
Yeah. So like our movement, like I said, we didn't take the same path twice, which, we took every single route we could. But we also, our movement, we no longer wedged out, wedge is good for, being in a firefight because, you can get online and, establish a field, a firing line, and have a, maneuver element. But a wedge also provides maximum amount of like ground covered, right? So, we ended up filing everywhere because, if the point man didn't step on a bomb, then hopefully you wouldn't either,
Yeah.
So not spreading out our guys and moving in files and stuff like the Ranger files and whatnot. As for like our tactics, like we thankfully had the Kiowa helicopters quite a bit on standby for us. I mean, not every day, but when we could utilize them, we did. So our FOs and stuff, we would kind of do our own bait and hit as well. So like we would try to get ambushed while having the Kiowas on standoff. So they're just out of earshot, So the enemy would think that, oh, maybe, they went to go refuel or whatever. So this is our chance to get them. So, they'd hit us and then we'd instantly just have the Kiowas come in and we'd already have them, smoke marking their location or, we'd have a heading for them to take. And we used a lot of our air support in that way. So we did a little bit of baiting of our own.
Yeah.
But it just, the fighting just kind of grew into something of its own, it was like IED warfare and then, just gain fire superiority if you can. Hopefully you had air support.
Mm-hmm. And then too, the other aspect, I mean, did you guys, cause you guys were in it all the time, where you guys at least, I think some of the weird things with fighting a counterinsurgency, like you don't see a lot of bodies, the kill counts are hard to kind of figure out. Did you guys, cause you're so kinetic, did you guys at least manage to be like, yeah, we managed to cover some bodies. Yes, we got visual, we smoked these guys. Like, and they're hitting you every day, like even a platoon size element, like you guys are duking it out every day. That's a significant force on the counterinsurgency side. So were you guys kind of, so I don't say the kill ratio, but you know what I'm saying is like how was that per firefight? You got to hit, maybe you hit something, but you guys, it sounded like you were in much closer. So this isn't 50 or 500,000 yard standoffs. Sounds like this is up close. So what was that like for you guys? And, did you manage to have, I don't say success, but like, you know what I mean? Like, but some success there, Yeah. Confirms, and how did that evolve?
So, as the funding increased, we did see signs of us, getting them, right? So when we did maneuver on them and stuff, we jump over the wall where they were shooting you from. And, I came across, puddles of blood and stuff. So it's like, okay, yeah, we got them. But as for like bodies, no, like they medevac their wounded as well, and that's one of their plans to hit us, right? Like their tactics where you hit us hard and then exfil. They always had an exfil route, right? So as soon as, one of them went down, they're loading them up on the back of like a motorcycle and jetting out of there, right? So we would come across signs like blood pools and stuff like that. We listened to the ICOM radios. So every evening, the Taliban would do their own AARs and their reports, right? So they'd be checking in with their like leadership and, being like, Omar didn't make it, and stuff like that. So that was, that was always good to hear, because at least we were getting them and stuff like that. It as for like, actual recovery of like, enemy combatants and stuff like that, we didn't have any luck with that because they were always able to, exfil.
Yeah. And what size elements too were you guys estimating, per firefight, or, you probably tell the volume of it, but like I said, if they're exfilling, they're smaller guys and they're wearing, man jams and stuff like that, but it still takes a little bit to exfil a body, what size elements were you guys kind of encountering?
So, I mean, it's a lot different from my deployment with like the 1st of the 503rd, like with the 173rd, like, cause I was in, Northeast Afghanistan with them. So like that was like mountainous terrain. And like we were in an ambush up there, like over 150 guys ambushed us. So that was crazy. I don't feel like there was that many guys, there in the Arghandab River Valley. But, they worked in their like team, the squad size elements as well. And they were spread throughout the, the whole valley. So like our last kind of like big fight we got into right before we got ripped, we coined it the last patrol while we were doing like our left seat, right seat. And I feel like that was like the biggest firefight, we got into. as for like the number of guys there, it's hard to tell, right? Because we were surrounded. They're hitting us, from multiple sides. Now, whether that was them maneuvering, and hitting us from different angles, or if different elements were coming in at different times to cover each other's exfil, is really hard to tell. But I mean, it was anywhere from like a squad to a platoon-sized element themselves, So, we would be out in squad-sized elements, so about like 9 to 14 guys out on patrol. And then we'd have a QRF, come out if necessary of another squad, so. But I mean, we never felt like we had the upper hand,
Yeah.
Because they always had the jump on us, regardless. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a platoon out there. If you got 5 PKM machine guns popping over the wall right at you,
Yeah.
like, they got fire superiority right off the bat. So it's like, oh man. But,
So and then who was the unit that relieved you?
so that was the 101st.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was odd because the unit that relieved us at Cop Times, they weren't an infantry unit. They were actually a field artillery unit. So there's a whole battery that relieved us at Cop Times. And talk about like getting the short end of the stick. One, like you're tasked with an infantry, mission, and that's not your MOS, that's not your job, right?
Yeah.
Also, you're getting dropped out there. I think we got relieved kind of end of July, so in July, August, so the height of the fighting season.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's pretty rough. Yeah.
So like our left seat, right seat was just throwing them into the deep end. It's like we did our best to show them kind of the fighting that they were about to see in the valley, but I think like they had a very like rude awakening of like what we do as infantry, and on a daily basis, and they got their eyes opened, and that's kind of like the ending of my book. And I actually spoke with some of the 101st guys that replaced us, and they're working on a book of their own. So maybe there'll be, a sequel to my book.
Yeah.
And we'll learn about what happened after we left. What those guys accomplished after we were relieved is a story in its own. We did what we could with the numbers we could, we were working with less than a platoon, so we brought the fight the best we could to the enemy. But those guys had a whole battery, and the whole idea of like saturating the valley is what they really focused on. And they took ground from the enemy, and they did not like it. And they took heavy casualties doing it. But yeah, it's quite the story. So I hope that, their book gets out there as well. And, people can hear the whole story, and so many different stories out there. We talked about William Yeski's book, Damn the Valley and Bravo Company. The Bravo Company book by Ben Kessling is kind of what kicked off this whole snowball effect of books. But yeah, that's who got us out of the valley. It was 101st.
Yeah, and we'll kind of talk about the book, and so, what kind of prompted you to say, hey, we need to do this? Because when I talk with William, and I'm sure we'll have this, same thoughts as well, but, he brought it up, and I feel the same way because I'm infantry, And the last 10, 15 years, everything's been dominated by SOF, by special forces, by, SEALs, all this other shit. And their mission, it was great. I think it's awesome, but they weren't ever the main effort. Even Green Berets, they're part of like, hey, they're force multipliers, but the infantry came rolling in. It's like, hey, this is how we got to stop this stuff. Like it's still the main effort is the infantry. And, I feel like a lot of guys in the infantry don't feel, because they don't have a soft background, that it's worth writing for, but it actually is. I think there's, all the stories combined are what makes, what happened with the war effort, be like, hey, yeah, we did a lot of shit out there. It wasn't, everybody thinks that Afghanistan was all special forces guys running around getting after it, when it's not. It's a lot of, 18, 19-year-old kids, like you said, get thrown into firefights with a 150-man element getting after them, or down in the South or down in the RC East, it's a lot of that. That's where the movements were made. So, what kind of prompted you to finally say, hey, we need to tell our story?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what you said, like for the longest time, I didn't really think anybody cared. I wasn't a Navy SEAL. I wasn't a Green Beret, like we're just the regular Army. So it was like, I didn't I didn't really care, or I didn't think anyone cared to hear our story. But like, it was, so 12 years went by, and I hadn't spoken to a single one of those guys from that deployment. After that deployment, I ETS'd, and a lot of us were stop loss, so a lot of us ETS'd. So like, guys got moved to different units, guys got moved to different companies and platoons and stuff like that. 2 Charlie just kind of scattered like roaches in the light. Mm-hmm. And we hadn't seen or talked to each other for 12 years. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what happened in that valley kind of just like, it haunted us, and it's affected us ever since then. And I think we've all been trying to figure out how to go about dealing with that on our own for the last mm-hmm. 12 years. But I will give kudos to Ben Kessling for, going and writing the Bravo Company book, because he tried to tell Bravo Company's story, and I think it lit a lot of fire under all of our asses, because we all had a story to tell about that valley, and that valley still had a grip on all of us. Mm-hmm. So after that book came out, I reached out to the guys of Second Platoon and Charlie Company, and I was like, "Hey guys, like, what do you think about us writing a book? This book's out. Like, cat's out of the bag. Guys, we've been approached by journalists in the past to write a book. There's actually an article about the last patrol in the Atlantic magazine. A journalist was embedded with us." But guys have been really touchy about the subject of, writing about what happened to us, because our platoon took 6 KIA and 14, wounded. So it's like that wound was still pretty fresh in our minds, for the longest time. So when reporters approached us right after, we were just like, nah. But I think because it was one of us that was writing the story, it was me. And I did everything I could to include the guys in like every part of this. They gave me the green light, and once they gave me the green light, I basically took a year of my time, and I traveled around the country, and I linked up with every single one of them. I met them at their homes, if they would allow it. Most of them did. If they wanted to meet me for breakfast or a coffee, I met them. I realized it's been 12 years, but, But, for like 99% of them, like, they welcomed me into their homes with like open arms, and that was like the most powerful moment in my life, is getting to see those guys, their families, their wives, their kids, their friends, and just seeing the men that they have become. But during that process, I sat down with each and every one of them and interviewed them. I recorded those interviews. And then once the honeymoon was over, I had to sit down and write the book. So throughout that whole process, like, we had Zoom calls. We even had a reunion. We set up our own 2 Charlie reunion. We hijacked a wedding. So our old platoon sergeant's son was getting married.
Yeah.
We hijacked the wedding and crashed it. And I mean, we did it respectfully. Yeah. Those were invited, but we kind of planned a reunion around that wedding. And going forward, we're trying to do annual reunions and stuff like that. But I sat down, and for about 6 months, I listened to the interviews. I kind of immersed myself back in the valley, and wrote the book. And then after the book was done, I shared it with all the guys. So I wanted to see what they thought, and if they gave me the thumbs up, then I'd pursue publishing it. But my main objective for the book was just kind of to give the guys like a tool, because I know it's hard for a lot of them to talk about some of the things that happened. So if their family members wanted to know what happened, but it's too hard for them to talk about, they could just point to a book, and their families could read the book and maybe understand a little better why their loved one is the way they are, or why we do the things we do. So that was my reason. And it, it's helped the guys tremendously. Working through those tough times together, coming back, seeing each other, like, you know, it's been crazy, and we plan on continuing it in the future. Dale Nollinger, one of our two Charlie guys, is he's been a big help with that, organizing these reunions, getting all the knuckleheads together. It's kind of like herding cats when it comes to planning things and getting guys all on board and stuff like that. But he's helped out a lot. But yeah, so we got this book. William Yeske was a huge help in getting this publishing deal. He basically kind of introduced me to the publishers of Casemate, talked me up and stuff. And, so yeah, I've got a publishing deal for the book. Been working on promoting it and stuff, which I've included the guys in promotions and stuff. They're all excited, posting pictures and videos and stuff. And another thing is a lot of our videos and pictures were lost throughout the years, all the hard drives and stuff with viruses and whatnot. So a lot of guys lost a lot of photos and stuff over the years. So I was able to kind of gather what I could and put them up on, social media, like we got a Facebook page and Instagram and stuff. So that they could, download and get those pictures, and even some video clips, I was able to, decrypt them and save them as MP4s so that the guys can, see those again. So it's just a work in progress, but what's important to me is like, this book is written kind of like third person omniscient, right? So it's not my story, it's our story. And it's really important to me, like, that I made that clear. It's like, I could have just written the story about me, Sergeant Bragg, but that wouldn't do this story justice. To tell the story right, I had to tell our story. So
I agree with you. I think that's a big thing for the infantry. When it comes to the let's say the special operations guys, but the SEAL books, all that shit, it's always about buds and fucking working out. And like, kind of half a deployment, some one incidents that happens that's kind of like whatever. And now they're writing a book or there's some influencer. I do, I think that's what the imagery is. Guys, we're a unit, we work together. And I feel the same way, because I've thought about writing books as well. But every time I think about it, I'm like, well, I'm not writing it for me. If I write it, it's going to be for the guys. And I think a lot of guys feel that way. It's like, well, it wasn't just me in a squad in Iraq, or it wasn't just me in a team in Afghanistan. It's everybody. It's the whole, everyone contributed, and it's everyone's story. And I think that's, and I agree with William and you. It's like on the aspect of like, I think we need to start telling these stories, because I think everyone thinks that, what did the infantry do during this 20-year war? And it's like a lot, like a fucking lot. Like I'd never heard of Arghandab. I've heard about it, but it's like, oh, now I know how crazy Arghandab was. Like I've heard of Kandahar, I know of Helmand, like what was going on in Arghandab. It's like, so all these areas that had a bunch of fighters in them and infantry dudes getting after it. It's like, we need to hear those stories, and that needs to be recorded, because those tactics and even what happened, what works, what doesn't, how fast as things evolve in a counterinsurgency, what still works at conventional side. Like, what did the Russians do? Now, you guys were reading literature from the Russians, and God knows whatever country goes next, they'll be reading about, the Devil's Playground, and and all that stuff. Be like, oh shit, check out what these guys are doing. Same valley, same name, same city, and whatnot. So
they'll make the same mistakes we did too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, well, we know this is a bad area. Let's try to figure this out. It's gonna be rough. But one of these times we'll get it. But yeah, I think it's I think that's telling the guy's story. I think that is a bit of a kind of a release a little bit, and I'm with you guys. We're 15 years on, 14, 15 years, and now guys are starting to feel comfortable telling their stories, or like, even with myself, like the last 2-3 years, about the last 2 years probably has been, I've been warming up to being like, okay, I can talk about some of these experiences a little bit more publicly. With friends, I'm a little more loose. My wife asked me, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good at telling, but it publicly always felt weird. Like I was like, oh, look at me, look at this, whatever. But now other guys, have encouraged me, as well as like, us talking, and everyone's like, we just need to start doing this publicly, because Otherwise the stories get lost, you know, and they don't get out there. And there's a lot of lessons learned, and there's a lot of stories of heroics or guys that, you know, like I'm sure the families that you wrote about, they didn't know that their dad did that. You know, they didn't know that that's something that they did, you know, actions on the battlefield, you know, like, you know, cause there's guys out there, you're like, God, Lou's a fucking legend and no one knows who he is. You know what I mean? And they're like, what are you talking about? And then it's like, he's like some data analyst, you know what I mean? Like, dude was a fucking animal, you know, he's an animal out there. And, you know, now he's got like a few kids. He's like, oh, you know, whatever. Yeah. But it is kind of being able to tell those stories, and it is therapy, man. You know, I think
it is, it's so much more than a book, right? Like the whole process has just been like healing, you know, it's been healing, and it's about getting our story out there, but it's also about continuing our story as Two Charlie, right? Coming back together, you know, getting the band back together, right? Like I hadn't seen those guys in 12 years, but the second I walked through their front doors, it was just like yesterday, you know? And like, you know, if you go like in therapy, you know, and stuff like that, you know, if that works for you, great. But I know that for a lot of guys, it doesn't, you know. And if you try like group therapy, you know, like if that works for you, sweet, you know. But I know a lot of guys who that just becomes like a dick measuring contest, and it doesn't work, you know. So it's like the only way to truly heal from that kind of stuff is to do it with the guys who went through it with you, who the guys who know the valley, you know. And that's kind of what this whole process has become. It's been so much more than just a book, you know. We got a book out there for others, but like, yeah, there's a story behind the story, and yeah.
No, I agree. You know, and I think that's something too. I've recognized right away. You know, I was just trying to stay around guys or like-minded individuals that helped with my transition. But you know, we did our reunions and we talk on the phone, and you know, sometimes, you know, especially my early years was just like, let's go hang out and party, you know, because we were all 23, 24, you know. Yeah. And now, like, you know, we try to link up and hang out and talk, or we call each other a lot more often now. And, you know, even just hanging out, you know, it's therapy, and discussing things and finding things out, man. Like it was years later, we were on a trip to Italy for a guy's wedding that we served with. He was in the French army. And, it was just kind of like I was talking with my buddy he was my co-advisor. Me and him were in the sub team. So he was like my staff NCO, and I was the corporal and in our weapons company. And he was just telling me stuff that like I didn't know was going on behind the scenes, because I was a corporal. I wasn't a staff sergeant. You know what I mean? So it was like, and he's like, oh no, this is what actually happened. I'm like, oh dude, it's been 10 years. I thought, you know, this was like 2018. And I'm like, what? Like, I didn't know that, you know, like that's what happened. Was that the official? Cause I knew rumors, they all, you know, cause I was a corporal. So even though we were doing like a lot of heavy lifting, it's like, well, we don't know all the politics going on behind the scenes because we just weren't involved, you know? Yeah. So I agree with you. I think and you find things out. Like, I'm sure you were writing this book and you're like, holy shit, I didn't know this guy did this, you know, I didn't know this, but you know, this squad did this, or this team maneuvered and did that. I assumed this happened, you know, and so, you know, it's finding and putting the bigger picture together. I think that's what really sucks about being infantry too, especially when you're on your first deployments. I'm sure you feel that way too. It's like you only get like a quarter of the picture. I don't know why. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, we don't, even in the firefights, like the after action aspect, like, you know, it's like, but the commanders kind of see it, but we don't. Like, why are we here? What's going on? Why do I only know this 8 kilometers? Can I know what's going on in the rest? Can't? Like, you know, you're just like tunnel visioned. And sometimes it's just like things get caught up and you don't know what the hell's going on, you know, and that kind of sucks. Cause you know, like I said, my first deployment was like that, where I was just like, God damn, I don't know what's going on. You know, like it kind of sucks actually, not knowing what's, you know, what's going to happen next, or what effect things are happening, you know? So, but no, yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's a big therapy, you know. It's pretty awesome. You guys all got together to do.
And that was one of the cool things too, is like hearing from the Joes, you know, like they didn't know everything that the leadership was doing for them, you know, and hearing your guys like thanking you, or like being like, man, I didn't know you guys did all that for us, you know, like shit rolls downhill and you guys were there to, you know, stop it. And, you know, even me, you know, like, you know, the leadership above me, it's like, dang, I didn't realize all that. You guys protected us from all that, you know, and it's, yeah. So hearing that from the guys, and just, you know, hearing them, you know, appreciate the story, you know, being told and stuff. And it's super powerful. And yeah, And it's like, as a Joe, like, you were saying, you have a very minimal like sector of fire, right? But that's your sector of fire, and then as you get higher and higher in leadership, that sector of fire, grows. So, this book's told from our platoon perspective. So you're going to get the, boots on the ground grunt story. If you want to know all the politics behind what was going on, there's other books out there. But
yeah, exactly. But, so, well, this was awesome. So what kind of comes next? And then, for this book, I know it comes out October 15th. Are you kind of like doing a little bit of a press tour? You do you got Hollywood knocking on your door? What's going on? You got some big plans for this?
The book hasn't even come out yet, right? So I don't have anybody knocking on my door. Going forward, I'm just going to continue to, promote the book on Facebook and Instagram, just the Devil's Playground book. Just either one of those pages. Continue to just, be there for the guys at 2 Charlie and, be a support unit for them and getting them together and stuff like that. Cause that's what's important to me. If the book blows up, great. If we get some Hollywood deal, cool. But really, I just, I wanted to get the band back together and, to kind of just have the gang back. And, so, like one of the things that, I always feel like is like, you feel like, the old high school quarterback at the bar still wearing his Letterman jacket, you know the guy next to you and you're like, hey, you remember that championship game? It's like, in a way, like hopefully that writing this book is a way for me to take off the Letterman jacket,
Yeah.
To, move on with my life and, move, and hopefully the guys, can do the same, like hopefully, like throughout the years, when we're meeting up, and drinking beers and stuff, hopefully our conversations are less and less about the firefights and less about, the IDs and stuff like that. And they evolve to more and more of like, hey, how are the kids doing? Have they started T-ball yet? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows? The sky's the limit, right? If it's some sort of, dramatic rights deal, I know the Bravo Company guys are working on, doing some sort of documentary, but as of now, we have not been approached.
That's good. All right. So where can people look out for the book? Where can they find you? And then where can they find the book and whatnot when it gets released?
Yeah, so the book, we got a Facebook page and an Instagram. So at the Devil's Playground book. I'm posting a lot of photos and stuff there. So once the book comes out, you'll get a plethora of extra photos on those pages while you can read the book. You can find the book on Amazon, Casemate, the Casemate Publishers website, or just Amazon. Just search the Devil's Playground. If you want, you should probably search my name too, because if you search just the Devil's Playground, it might come up with like a bunch of like romance novels. Our book is kind of a romance novel.
Yeah. Like, this is a really weird infantry book, but all right, I'll keep going.
Just Amazon or Casemate Publishers. You can pre-order it at Barnes and Noble or anywhere really books are sold.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, bro. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.